This video is going to go over some general techniques you can use to improve your writing for mass media, but they're pretty good tips just in general for writing. Some basic techniques, especially when writing for a broad audience like we are in mass media, is to write simply. Simple language can convey a really powerful message. You can think of some really simple, famous quotes. I used one in class today when I said that form should follow function. Sometimes these things can be almost like cliches, but if used right, they can convey meaning, maximum meaning, with the minimum amount of words. And that's really what we're trying to get at. Using the fewer words, the better. This comes back to the fact that our audience oftentimes doesn't have a lot of time, so we want to make sure that we use the words that we want to use and don't add filler. Also, the shorter the word, the better. So using after instead of subsequent and large instead of substantial can make sure that the most people as possible can read and understand our writing. Unless the bigger word is more precise or more accurate, again, be modest in your writing. If that bigger word is necessary, if that's the precise word that you mean, and using a bigger word means you don't have to use 5 smaller words, by all means, use the bigger word. But make sure that the words you choose, you've chosen for a reason, and that reason isn't just to show off your knowledge. Now, simple sentences are often going to be better in these cases than compound sentences. I am a queen of run-on sentences. That's where editing and revision really come in. And again, thinking about the audience you're writing for. Who is it that you want to be speaking to? So I'm going to show you an example in these 2 slides. And think about why the second version of this same information is going to be better. She was shot through the right lung after confronting a woman married to her ex-husband inside the Fort World store on Bankhead Highway shortly before 1 p.m. That's one sentence, and it's getting through a lot of information. Now, if you're reading an article online, it might be easier to understand if it was said this way. She was shot in the Fort World store on Bankhead Highway. Shortly before 1 p.m., she confronted the woman married to her ex-husband. That woman shot her through the right lung. So, in this case, think about the fact that this is 3 sentences instead of 1. But is it clearer? I think so. In fact, especially the part about the fact that the woman is married to her ex-husband. It becomes really muddled what the relationship is between all of the characters in the sentence and the first one around. This time, it's a little bit clearer. This might just happen to be popping up on your first AP quiz. Remember that punctuation is there to serve a purpose. It shouldn't just be there superfluously. Or you shouldn't use extra punctuation more than what you need. Just kind of putting it into effect. Practice brevity. Speaking of simple sentences, kill your darlings. There might be a word or a phrase you really love. If it doesn't serve a purpose, get rid of it. This is one of the things we'll be practicing in editing. Make sure that everything that's left serves a purpose in your writing. If words and phrases or sentences don't add to the content, delete them. Remember, think about it like yourself. You don't have the time for extra phrases, so you don't want them in your writing. Eliminate jargon and cliches. So, have maximum impact, but make sure that you don't overuse things. And, as I mentioned in our class, avoid technical language unless you're writing for a trade publication. If there are overused words and phrases, don't use them. Don't use made-up gobbledygook words that don't actually exist. I'm sure we can all think of a word that doesn't mean anything that gets used a lot. Especially you hear this a lot in like tech and ad copy, best in class, all those kinds of things. They don't mean anything. Make sure that you don't use imprecise phrasing and get caught up in whatever the current cliche and buzzword is. Use precise language that means what you want it to mean and make sure it's clear what you mean. That's the important thing. Use familiar words your audience will understand. Now, one of the things to watch out for is things that are colloquial or that are localized. And so here's two examples that I like to use that remind us that what we think are familiar words, we need to be sure are familiar to our specific audience. There are any number of words to describe a long sandwich filled with a variety of deli meat. A hero, a hoagie, a submarine, a deli sandwich, a grinder, if it's been in the oven. I'm sure you guys can think of a few others. They all mean the same thing, and depending on the part of the country you're in or what country you're from, you're going to call them different things. I bet some of you guys who are from different countries have a totally different word for it. So make sure that you're using a word that's familiar to your audience. Same thing with a sugary carbonated beverage. Is it soda? Is it pop? Is it Coke? I'm still flabbergasted. My cousin-in-law comes from Georgia, and where she's from, you can get root beer Coke. What kind of Coke do you want? I want a root beer. That just absolutely blows my mind. My best friend is from Pittsburgh, where they talk about pop rather than soda. So make sure you're clear about what it is that you're talking about when you talk to your audience. Now, be as simple as possible and as straightforward, but don't be boring. Hemingway is famous for writing a lot with very simple sentences, and yet his sentences are still varied and interesting. Not my favorite, but a lot of people love him. If you use only one type of sentence over and over again, it does get a bit boring. So do try to mix it up, especially if you're writing something longer. This is kind of like being clear, where I was saying that you can be clear while still bringing in elements of storytelling. Just make sure that at the end, it all adds up. The other thing, and I think you'll have seen this a little bit in that sentence example, is to avoid placing the subject at the end of your sentences. Now, if we were in class, I'd ask you why you think that might be. I'm going to tell you that for a lot of the times in media, again with, short attention span theater, when it's a bit like writing a lead for a inverted pyramid style piece, you want the most important information first. So think about it. What's more important than the main character in your sentence? So putting that at the beginning tells the reader what's important. So if you withhold it to the end, sometimes they're wondering what's going on. So make sure that you build your sentences around nouns and verbs. Again, this is the simple side. Now you can mix things up, and yes, sometimes you're going to withhold things, but make sure that you always have really strong nouns and verbs. Your best verbs are going to provide action and description. So things excite, people forgive, you might explore, or things might explore. So you want verbs that really drive the action forward and make things interesting. Make sure that, last but not least, you tie your writing together. Use transitions in a way that leads the reader on a journey with you. And that way, they'll want to come with you from beginning all the way to the end. Speaking of the end, that's all I got. So I hope these tips come in handy and are useful for you on our writing journey.